Hello, everybody. Welcome in the next stream talk by Protest. This time it's Yorck's talk, and I will introduce Yorck a little bit. Yorck is one of my colleagues at work. I joined Yorck's studio a half a year ago, and I have to say it really changed my mind about testing, and that's why we decided to give you some taste of his opinions and experience in the software development and project management and management view on testing. So I give you the word, Yorck.
Thank you, Jan. A kind introduction. Always a joy to work with you as well. And hello, Protest. I love the name of your community. It's really beautifully chosen. So as it says in the introduction or in the invitation, it's an outsider view on testing. So please take everything I'm going to say with a grain of salt. And but still, I hope I can inspire you a little bit. Yeah, I'm Yorck. I'm working for Sinne Schrader. Repeat after me. It's a Hamburg-based, German-based agency, and we also have a studio here in Prague, where I'm sitting right now. And if you want to have a picture about what we're doing, we're working with large international clients and creating platforms for them, digital platforms. So for instance, if you go to Volkswagen.com, you will see our work there. So we are doing the international websites for them as one of the examples. I'm not a tester, but I worked many, many years as a developer, and I also practiced test-driven development during this time. And today I want to talk with you about Accelerate. It's a study. We will look at it in a moment. But first, a few words about me. So I'm German. I was actually born in Munich and worked most of my life in Hamburg, now since 5 years here in Prague. I studied economy, but I didn't really finish it. Then went on to study software development and IT. And I did a degree in that. Then I worked many, many years as a coder for a renewable energy company, basically a unicorn, a company that got really big in Germany. And now I'm at a digital agency at Sinne Schrader and in Czech Republic. Privately, I like all kinds of art. So I love going to museums. I take photography. I surf. I kite surf. I actually did not find an emoji for vinyl, but I have a large vinyl collection at home. I like playing computer games, riding a skateboard, sometimes in the office as well, and riding to the office with my bike. So let's jump into the topic right away. If you look at our current software industry, and especially at the big players like Netflix or Tesla or Spotify, whoever you want to name there, you just see that they have an extremely high performance, and the velocity of them is increasing faster and faster every year. And I think the market is just working that way, and there's not any way to stop them. So I think it's up to us to also figure out how can we accelerate our own work and become as fast or maybe better than our competitors in there. And yeah, so if we look at statistics from 2011 from Amazon, that's what I found online in some form of presentation. So the source is written below there. You can see that Amazon was doing 11.6 seconds, every 11.6 seconds deployment during a weekday. And the maximum number of deployments in a single hour was 1,079. Again, that's 2011. You can read other statistics here on the slide, but it's how radical the industry was already 10 years ago. And some people say as an apology, yeah, but it's Amazon, so they can do it. But we are this highly regulated, publicly listed company. Basically, Amazon is the same. So they have all the red tape that all the other organizations, but still they manage to be that fast. Amazon actually spent 4 years from 2001 to 2004 to reorganize completely towards this direction. But they kind of gave themselves the goal to become faster, and they achieved it. And probably these statistics are way more extreme nowadays. So why do some manage to be so performant and others not? This is what 4 researchers ask themselves, and they put all the results and the topics into a book and a study. The book is called Accelerate, in this study. And what they basically did, it was 4 authors writing on it. So it's Nicole Forskren, Jess Humble, Jean Kim, and 3 researchers. And they did this 4-year scientific research and tried to figure out, so what kind of capabilities and practices are important to accelerate the development and delivery speed of software. In these times, they basically looked at the very end of the value chain of creating software. So they did not really look at what they call the fuzzy front end, the early design periods, prototyping and ideation, but they rather said, okay, let's look at the time that is happening at these high-performing organizations between an actually like merge or master or code being ready until a company is able to deploy this software. So we're looking more in this DevOps-ish area of research here right now. This study gives us solid guidance about what works to become faster, to accelerate, and what doesn't work and what doesn't matter. And we'll come to that later, maybe in the QA section as well. It also finds that improvement is possible for everyone, as long as the team and leadership focus more on non-functional aspects of software development. And maybe there's one too long didn't read of this whole stream here. And this one thing is that speed depends on stability. So basically whatever a company invests into stability of their products and stability of their CI, CD pipelines is really beneficial for performance. What they did actually for this study, and that's so valuable in my eyes, I'm an engineer after all, is that it's a scientific approach. It's not a business book, blah, blah, but it's actually looking at 23,000 survey responses over the course of 4 years. And they analyzed more than 2,000 companies within this period. And these companies were all kind of sizes from 5 to up to 10,000 employees. They did even an academic peer review in science journals and then used fancy math and statistics to do the analysis, topics like cross-sectional methods, which is basically simply put the correlation of beer and obesity. But they use these methodologies in order to prove their points and to help everybody onwards. So what I found actually quite interesting in the book is that they asked themselves in the beginning, what does it mean to deliver software and can it actually be measured? And they asked themselves, so what defines a high-performing software organization or software delivery organization versus a low-performing one? And within the first year, they came up with 4 basic metrics. And they said, if companies or organizations are really good at these 4 aspects of software delivery performance, then they tend to be elite or high performers. And before I'm diving into the data and into the lots of text here on this slide, the industry is picking up on these topics currently. So since 2018, when the book was published, if I recall correctly, already in 2019, 55% of the companies that they surveyed in the study were already in the elite and in the high performer section. So that would mean, simply put, that already 55% of the companies out there ship at least 1 time per day to their users. And from 2018 to 29 alone, the share of the elite section tripled. And that's why I think the study is really serious, also for all QA engineers out there, to understand what's the background about it. So let's look at these 4 aspects in a bit more detail. First one is deployment frequency. So we saw that from Amazon earlier on that sheet or on the graph with Netflix. They basically, high deployment frequency means like shipping product to your users, to your customers within the highest frequency possible. And elite performers do ship multiple times a day. High performers at least do it once per day or once per week. And then already you're in the medium and low performing. So I don't know about your software product, but I observe a lot of software organizations where we ship software within our agile iterations. So basically, most teams probably do that every 2 weeks. This is something that should be challenged if you take this study seriously. The second topic, which they said is important for organizations to align to, is lead time for changes. And here it's becoming, again, very DevOps-ish. So it's important to understand that's not the fuzzy front end, but it basically means once your code hits master, once your code is ready for deploy, start the stopwatch and figure out how long it takes to actually deliver the software to your users. So with elite performers, that means less than one, sorry, it's a typo here. It's less than 1 hour that's less than 1 hour it takes them to actually ship the software out. So if I observe other organizations, again, there's QA coming into the game, figuring out how fast your automation technology enables you to ship topics to your users is really beneficial and helpful. Then time to restore service, a third metric that they say really important to align to, is basically saying how long does it take me to restore a service once it's broken. And in the elite corner here, we see it's less than 1 hour. So you identify a bug in your production system. How long does it take you to fix it at the end of the day? Low performance, just to put that into perspective, is between 1 week and 1 month to actually fix a bug in your system. And the fourth metric to align to, it's the change failure rate. So how many of the changes you're doing on your software do actually create a failure, create a bug, whatever. And here it's getting also pretty interesting. I think that the elite performers, same as the high and the medium performers, they have a range of between 0 and 15%. It probably depends on your industry. So if you're doing a banking application, you probably do not really have lots of errors of margin, but nevertheless, also the elite performers do ship updates into production that actually contain a bug or an error. So they do not try to be waterproof and super secure in the delivery. They just basically say, okay, we have a margin of error that we are okay with and accept of having. So we'll come back later to that a little bit again, but I think it's a bit of an attitude game to balance also the interest of your product versus can I ship a bit more radical, assuming that I do have a bit of an error quota in it or not. And so if you want to figure out how to measure yourself against these 4 key metrics that accelerate, is claiming, then you can go to devops-research.com/quick-check, and you can answer a couple of questions concerning a product and figure out, are you elite, high, medium, or low performer in these regards. Cool. Let's go back to the study a little bit more. So in a nutshell, what the study figures out beyond these 4 metrics of saying, okay, this is how I measure high performing companies, and companies should kind of align to these 4 metrics. They say in a nutshell, there are a couple of capabilities or stabilization factors that organizations should have in order to create more speed. And the first one is continuous delivery. And the second one are lean practices. And interestingly, the study finds that the first effect of organizations that are focusing on continuous delivery and lean practices are increased job satisfaction. Later, we will shortly talk about deployment pain. So figure out if your team is afraid or scared about pushing something to production. That is not really a good state, mental state for your team. It stresses you if you can't really do informative decisions and you're a bit unsure. So if your continuous delivery pipeline is not good, it could be an indicator, doesn't have to be, but it could be an indicator that the job satisfaction is a little bit lower. But once you bake in these continuous delivery and lean practices into your software creation flow, job satisfaction seems to raise. And thus, and out of this output, the organizational performance also increases. And if you correlate the organizational performance with the stock price development of organizations that participated in this study, you will see that the high performers or elite performers had a 50% higher market capitalization growth over 3 years compared to low performers. So you're really talking money here at the end of the day if you put stability first and then gain speed out of that. So how could these look in real life, the continuous delivery and the lean practices? On the left, that's a picture of FreeNow. That's basically the German Liftago, so a ride sharing app, taxi app to get you around towns. And they actually post this picture on their Glassdoor account, and it probably pays a lot into developer experience or employee experience. But at the end of the day, you see the deploy bar. So it's literally a bar, doesn't have any drinks and ugly screens with a lot of wires coming out of them on the wall. But if you are a developer at FreeNow, they have the so-called 220 rule. So basically what it means is you as a developer, you have a new functionality that you want to ship. You go to the deploy bar, there's a DevOps colleague waiting for you who's in charge of all these dashboard and monitoring aspects on the wall. And you get 2% of the traffic for 20 minutes. And then you just observe, right? You will see, okay, maybe you have a new functionality to be rolled out in Barcelona, and you observe, okay, these 2% of the users that are getting the new software, how does the application react? Do we have good conversion? Do we have good stability? Is everything working properly? And after 20 minutes, the DevOps engineer basically just nods at the developer and asks, do you want to ship it? And even if there are error states or anything, think about the 0 to 15% change failure rate. The developer is enabled to just say, yeah, release my software, we're all good. Or basically say, no, let's pull it back, I'll rework it and figure something new out. But this form of continuous delivery completely outmaneuvers classical approaches of change advisory boards, long QA lists, figuring out when to ship in what bundle, versioning your software and so on. Versioning your software is still good, but it basically gives the power to the team people. And the good thing about the dashboards are that you have informative decisions. So basically you will kind of know with 2% of the traffic what will happen, and your deployment pain is way less. On the right, you see this greenish dashboard that is basically coming from SoundCloud, and it's picking up the second principle. So on the left, continuous delivery. On the right one are the lean management principles. And basically, it's a lean dashboard trying to showcase to teams how much work in progress are they having. So think about how many user stories are currently open in your sprint, how many team colleagues are working in parallel on user stories. So the higher that number, the higher will be the merge pain, the higher will be the integration pain, the higher are the chances that your product may fail also with a high variability at the end of the day. So there are already open source products. The right one from SoundCloud is open source. You can check it out on GitHub. The left one is proprietary and only applies to FreeNow. But nevertheless, this is real life, how elite and high performers are already using the principles of Accelerate, and is a bit proving also the study that they are doing. So let's think a little bit about, okay, what's actually in the game. So we're to protest here. So what is Accelerate saying about QA? And before I really deep dive on that, Accelerate is propagating or proposing, that's the better word and the correct word, 24 capabilities that these elite and high performers are having somehow in place. These 24 capabilities, it's underlined in the book. The authors say, please do not just copy and paste them, but just understand the underlying capability and then decide for your own organization, for your own team, whether that helps you forward or not. But exposing yourself to these topics will already probably improve your processes, your workflow, your value chain way more than not even like touching these topics. And you also see a little bit clustered here on the left in the blue. These are probably, from my point of view at least, capabilities that agile teams, developers, QA, Scrum Masters, and so on should delve into, but it's a strong focus on engineering. In the middle-ish, the lighter blue one, these are mostly capabilities from my point of view that should be addressed by Scrum Masters and people who try to improve the flow and the speed in which the team learns. And on the green side, on the right, you will see leadership capabilities. So what are things that leaders, bosses, however you want to call them, should incorporate and foster and put into practice so that organizations can accelerate? And I marked here a little bit with heart emojis, the three pretty clear topics from my point of view that are important for QA. So it's test automation, it's test data management, and implement continuous delivery. So I think these are three sectors where you're pretty strongly correlated or where you're working with on a day-to-day basis. The other topics with finger up, the pointer here, are topics where I believe I would love to see a bit of more opinion from the QA community on them. So what about the automation of deployment? Or how do you implement continuous integration? What could developers improve to improve QA by just looking at continuous integration? How do you shift left on security? Whose task is that? Is that a QA task, a Scrum Master task, or a developer task? It's not really clear, nobody tells it, but somebody needs to do situative lead. And discussing, for instance, with your development colleagues, whether they are actually building loosely coupled architectures or not, could be quite interesting. And you could learn a lot about and maybe also simplify the way you're testing things in the future. Then so many teams are out there that are not proactively checking system health. A lot of teams are just being informed about bad states of system health, but how can you maybe forecast the next 2, 3, 4 days or 2, 3, 4 hours, given like a certain growth of users or a system overload that is maybe coming in, and lots of other topics here. But I will not pick any of those. I will look a little bit more what I find most relevant now for the QA topics, but nevertheless, please look at the pointer ones in the future as well. Maybe get the book and read on these capabilities yourself, and then teach your teams about how to improve in these areas. It will benefit anyone and everyone. So the first and the biggest topic I believe is that teams are having is deployment pain. And I think you as QA engineers, you could first ask yourself and wonder if your deployments are feared. So are you afraid of shipping something? Like, how do you test the state of the application? Like, do you do that manually or semi-automated or fully automated? But do you feel a bad feeling in your pain whenever you hit the deploy button or your team is actually doing that? If that's the case, I think you should really sit down and think about how you can reduce this deployment pain. I mentioned already the proactive monitoring, so foreseeing already what's happening. Think of the free now example we saw with the deploy bar, and think about deployment automation. All of these things will allow you to get a feedback loop on the system state. And you will not have to drive the quality, but you can just use the quality as a feedback into your process and do a way more informative decision and ship things out and maybe remove stress factors from your day-to-day operation. So that's one of the key things I would like to be asked more by QA engineers into the team. So what is our deployment pain? And I think you have the power often to say yes or no to a shipment. Sometimes you may even fear if the shipment is good or not. Accelerate says invest into automating more of that and getting more informative decisions onto your decks so your stress levels are lowering. But I also know that we are all working in these often like feature-ritis environments. So new features are constantly pushing on your deck. With this Accelerate book, I think you have kind of a bit of a magic book and a bit of a power of saying, okay, let's focus a bit more on stability. Let's introduce the first chart on whatever network traffic or whatever you want to do at the end of the day, and start step by step improving the deployment process and reducing the pain. Then the next topic that is actually managed there is test data management. I actually just want to look shortly on it because I'm not really opinionated about it. I think test data is super important to have. And I guess all of you who are listening to the stream right now are probably looking a lot also on test data and getting that in. I think the last point here in this list is quite interesting. So caution, teams should, however, minimize whenever possible the amount of test data needed to run automated tests. So it's not about getting the full access to things, but more being smart about it. So am I able to condition my test data? So let's say I need test data, especially for the Barcelona taxi market, which may be different to the one in Prague. I don't know, but ask yourself, okay, how can I be smart about test data management, and how can I be smart about putting this test data into my test automation routines? Yeah, but one of the topics, and this is where it's the outsider view in the title of this talk, which I want to stress a little bit more. It's actually the analysis within Accelerate saying it's interesting to note that having automated tests primarily created and maintained either by QA or an outsourced party is not correlated with IT performance. Maybe it's just shocking for myself, but I observed that a lot of QA teams inside and outside of Sinestrada are focusing on actually having the ownership on test automation and build within, I say that explicitly, the little walled gardens of QA, more and more test automation routines to just make their job easier. And I think this is not the right approach. I'll come to that in a moment here, but it could make sense to look at how are actually like the biggest players doing testing and the strongest software companies. So you may say, yo, that's lame. So he's coming up with Google now, and apologies for that. But sometimes I think it's good to see a North Star or get some inspiration. And in the preparation of this talk, I read a little bit about testing at Google. And interestingly, at Google, testers are not really seen as manual testers. So rather, they are guiding developers into test automation. So there's a difference in writing test automation and into guiding developers into test automation. I think if you want to be able to guide developers into test automation, you need to understand test automation to a certain degree. It wouldn't make sense just out of the blue to come up. But I think developers are most of the time faster in automating things and writing software than QA engineers. That may not be true for you personally, so apologies for that if you're already doing that or if you're really fast in writing code. But in general, I think you do not have these careers of like full-blown software developers that are coming into QA. And Google also says that manual tests are never a go-to method for catching regression or covering standard functionality. This may be clear in your project as well. I guess whenever there's a regression coming up, you will try to automate it and simplify things later on. But I think the way they do it is like QA engineers making sure that a regression is understood, and then the development teams or the developer roles within your agile teams are actually implementing then the automation against this regression. But sure, manual tests are still good. So especially in early stages of product development. So when your product may still pivot and do different directions, or things are really built quite quickly and test automation may not really make sense because it can change totally, then obviously for identifying non-trivial problems, so that's the exploratory, maybe manual testing path of it. And also judging by LinkedIn, Google outsources a lot of manual test work whenever they want to do it for these non-trivial problems to overseas development shops. So interesting, at least for me to observe. So what's actually the role of a test engineer at Google? So the main focus is to keep Google's continuous automation testing infrastructure efficient and effective. Also, and the second main focus is knowledge sharing, fostering best practices and tools developments. So how does that foster in your day-to-day operation? First, you will do test prioritization. So working with your product owner, assuming you're working in an agile context, basically means, okay, check out the user stories for the next 2 weeks. Okay, this user story needs a lot of test prioritization. This one we do not really test at all, or we're happy with unit tests being produced by the developers. And then the second one, and that is kind of my highlight and my dream also to see more in the community, is writing test scripts and building testable user journeys that developers can use to test their own code. So this is the tip of the testing pyramid. You may be aware of that. So we're doing the front-end test, the application test, the last layer. Probably you will use something like Cypress or similar tools for that. But actually, you will not write a Cypress test suite for your QA team and your colleagues or for yourself, but you will write Cypress test suites that you hand back to the developers. So whenever they're running through their continuous integration the next time, your newly automated test script and tested and user journey is actually used by the developers right away. And I believe a focus of QA to say, okay, developers are my customer in this whole team could be very beneficial for accelerating software delivery. Yeah, and the rest you can read yourself, but fostering communication between product stakeholders to ensure successful releases. This is all what the Accelerate study basically says. Have a higher deployment frequency and constantly improve the flow towards it. So if I observe QA over the past 20 years that I am in the software industry, and that's what I try to depict with this picture a little bit, often they can be perceived as the judge, right? So developers develop, and then your iteration is coming to an end, and basically all the packages queue up in front of the desk of QA, and one by one QA is releasing them into production. But basically what you can become a bottleneck this way. Often teams react with this bottleneck status of saying we have to declare feature freezes. We cannot, like inner walls, basically saying, okay, in order to cope with this massive flow of complexity, I need to shut the door and say, stop developing right now, so I still have enough time to ship within my iteration. If you are acting or like working in an environment like that, I would really highly try to ask you to reflect that situation and say, okay, what does actually need to change so that I do not need to declare feature freezes or breaking this flow of continuous delivery and high deployment frequency according to Accelerate, and rather ask yourself, okay, what can I do as QA to improve on these 4 metrics like deployment frequency, lead time, change failure rate, and time to restore? Because I believe they're correlated. Let's say you have a really low time to restore. So your teams are really quick in running an update after you found a bug in the production environment. This will absolutely allow you to go into a higher deployment frequency, right? So because you say, okay, once we have a bug, I can fix it quickly and it's going to be okay. This higher deployment frequency will shorten your lead time because you will just be capable of bringing these ideas, these products, these features out on the market way faster. And within this higher iteration and with more automation on all ends, your change failure rate will drop. So I think wherever you start from it, you will have positive benefits in all of these 4 KPIs. But you have to somehow start within your team to measure those. And that's probably one of the hardest part to start first and teach your organization and your leadership also about, okay, cool, it's worth focusing on these 4 to become faster in what we are doing. And one more I wanted to mention here, it's kind of a very old school slide, and sorry, but that's my age maybe a little bit. It's a focus of QA back also onto non-functional requirements. I know a lot of you are already testing against these non-functional requirements, but let's be honest to ourselves, in our day-to-day operation of feature pressure, getting out there on the market, mostly we look at correctness and reliability. So is the feature implemented correctly? And is the software kind of reliable? And yeah, do we have a fast time to recovery or a good fault tolerance within the software? But there's more steps beyond that, which I believe are QA metrics and should be way more advocated by QA engineers. It's the usability. So how do you give a stamp onto good usability of your software? So that means good UX and UI, accessibility, other topics like that. How do you help your team forwards with the QA quality assurance of performance? So how do you increase the response time or the render time of your software? There's maintainability. So how do I improve the continuous integration, continuous delivery? How do I measure technical depth? I don't like that term too much, but I think it's just a neglect of maintenance and focus on stability. What Accelerate tells us scientifically, focus on stability instead of, and then you will get performance out of that. But we are not really properly aligned to that often. And portability. So how can you advocate microservices, serverless architectures, headless? How can you help with evolutionary architectures and build maybe micro front ends? How can you be opinionated about that as a QA engineer and help your team members move into this direction? Security, another topic, shift left on security. Who's in charge within a team of increasing the quality of security? I believe you can be advocates for that once you have an organization that allows you to work on these stabilization factors and you have an organization that understands stability is the first step to performance. I know I repeat myself here a little bit, but that's the too long didn't read here. Yeah, flexibility and scalability, all other topics. And most of us within these agile teams are so busy with the task at hand that we stop reflecting this larger ecosystem of software development. So this is an appeal to the community here to really gain a leading role in these topics and defend that. And how can you do that? I believe QA tasks should stretch out to more roles. And again, I'm just using agile teams here right now. That's mostly how we're working, but it fits to any kind of methodology that you're using in your software. So how can you, for instance, help the product owner of your software to measure the quality of the return of invest? So is there maybe a dashboard where you can say, okay, we're making more money with that or less money with that? How can you help the product owner in user experience, in the test prioritization that I mentioned earlier? And how can you help the product owner to organize around value? I think that is a very good consulting role you can take within your team. Or looking at the developers in the lower left corner here, write reusable user journeys for them. Ask them, how do you need my test automation, front-end automation, so that you can bake it into your continuous integration and you don't need to worry about executing this test anymore because you already shifted that to the development part. You probably do the day-to-day to prepare test cases and write acceptance criteria. But this is, again, how can you be smarter about them and so on. Then teach concepts like test-driven development or other kind of testing strategies. Be an advocate like Google is using that, really saying teach the team members about quality metrics and quality improvement potential within the team. And yeah, maybe ship within your iteration. I hope lots of the listeners here are doing that already. Maybe stop shipping at the end of your iteration, but set up a process that allows you to ship anytime something is ready. So anytime something hits master, it takes you 1 more hour and bam, it's out there in the wild. Concerning the Scrum Master, decentralized decision-making. So remove these change advisory boards, remove the people who say, okay, we need to bundle this first and we can only roll out in a big blob. Try to challenge that, reach out to these IT departments or whoever is holding the power to your releases, lead a conversation with them. And basically help preserve options. So maybe think option could be one, a low change failure rate. So, a fast time to recover, I meant to say. So, you know, I have a higher variability if I can fix my system quite quickly, as opposed to when it takes me longer. So this can speed up, visualize and limit work in progress. So how can you as a QA engineer showcase to your team what work packages are flowing and getting out there into the wild, which ones are stuck, and how can you orient your teams towards a better understanding of lean processes within your team. And yeah, the lower right corner is basically what Accelerate and Google kind of claims about the topic, so I will not repeat most of it. But I guess very, very important is develop the QA know-how in the team and in the organization. So reach out there and explain the concepts, the ideas, and the topics that are out there, the latest talk and the latest gossip in engineering and testing towards the engineers. Cool. So this is the last one here, just a small summary. I think that the benchmarks of tomorrow are defined by the fast, capable, and brave. And that summarizes it. So we need to be faster with the way we're shipping things. Speed comes out of stability, not the other way around. It's not busy bee and stress and so on. It's really making things more chill, making things more automated, more professional. That makes you fast. The capable means you need to be the thought leader within your organization on QA. So you need to influence the outside about how they can improve within all topics of QA. And you need to be brave for that. That's probably the hardest thing. You need to stand up, raise your hand. You need to have this endurance at the end of the day of helping team members forward. And I believe these 24 capabilities from the Accelerate studies are a wonderful starting point, and they are not limited to certain roles. I especially believe they are a strong point for a lot of QA engineers, and you should put that kind of in your to-do list to leverage the topics in there. Take your teams by the hand and help them forward to accelerate. And as a summary, remember high-performing organizations align on these 4 key metrics: deployment frequency, lead time for change, change failure rate, and mean time to restore. Then your happiness improves if you do that, and also the commercial outcomes will improve over time. Learn that, and too long didn't read, speed depends on stability. And thank you very much for having me, and I'm looking forward to the Q&A session.
Thank you, Yorck, for a very nice talk. And I have some questions here already, so let's start with it. Here is the first one. Do you think that this high-performance environment also creates a bigger pressure on employees and bigger stress?
I think actually, we saw it on one side. The whole study basically said the first step, if we focus on these capabilities, is happiness. So I think it's all aimed at reducing stress. It's professionalizing, stabilizing the flow of work, as opposed to busy bee, next urgent thing. And Churchill put it so nicely: the urgent keeps you away from the important. And I think Accelerate just statistically really proves this is the important, your stability, these 24 capabilities and these 4 metrics. Focus on them and your stress will decrease. But yeah, I believe often the teams are just so driven by all the pressure outside, so they do not have the time to stop and reflect what they're doing. And that's why this book is so powerful, because it's science is magic that works. So you can just say, this is science, prove me otherwise. But maybe we can just start on improving on test automation and so on. I hope that answers the question. So it's totally aimed at improving employee happiness. That's one of the main goals I'm having.
I think so. Thank you. And second one, with what would you start as a first step to implement something from Accelerate?
I would really recommend to look at these 24 capabilities, and maybe you find one topic, test automation, if you want to be really close to your QA engineer role, or you pick something completely different, like create a generative culture. That's a leadership skill, so to allow people to choose their tools and the way and methodologies of work, so give back freedom to the team members. But whatever sparks joy in these 24 capabilities, maybe just start with that. Read on your own more about this capability and the topic, create a small presentation, go with that into your retrospective, or communicate that to your team and say, come on, let's start with that. And later on, we can do the rest of the 23 or rest of the 24. Yeah.
Nice.
So that's so cool about that study, that it's really concrete at the end of the day. And there will be 250 other capabilities your team can leverage, but these are just these statistical significant ones.
I agree. And next one is from Peter. What was your experience in TDD?
Hi, Peter. That's a funny. So it's already a couple of years back. So that was around 2007, and I was still an active developer. Actually, my team lead, my development lead back at the time, came to us, kids, we're gonna do something new. We're gonna do test-driven development, and everybody in the team was like this. We were like, no, like it was really. It created stress in the beginning, and we were like, okay, we're wasting time with the test-driven development. But then there was one breakthrough for a couple of us. It's not that everybody in the team stayed to it, but my breakthrough was that I was starting to be able to deliver or to write code without constantly, I was doing C# development and web development back then. So I constantly was compiling my software to see whether I did a mistake or not. So I had constant distractions in my flow of coding. And after, I think it was about 8-9 months in of test-driven development, I realized for the first time, wow, I just was coding for around maybe 40-45 minutes, and I hit play and it worked. So it removed the like this constant context switch of compiling, checking it in the browser, does it work? And this kind of, I think you say in Czech, like in German, bastel, like this bastel approach. Okay, if I do that, does it work? Does it still work? So this was the breakthrough for me. But in the beginning, I was completely opposed of doing test-driven development. And I don't think it's good for everyone, but I think it's a good concept to teach. And I think we kind of stopped talking in organizational context a lot about these approaches. And it may not work for you, maybe it works for you, but I think at least talking about it.
Thank you. And next question is a little bit off topic, but still, are you familiar with terms automated checking versus manual testing? Automation don't find bugs, only send warnings.
No, maybe you can paraphrase in the chat the question a little bit, but I'm not too familiar, or I wouldn't know how to answer that one.
Okay, never mind. Just let's move on. How to convince a corporate who doesn't even want to ship that often?
Yeah, I think you, I mean, okay, that's a longer story. It's an extra session, maybe one day. That's change management, right? How do I change organizations? And basically the first step of changing an organization is to create urgency. I mean, urgency right now, not importance, but urgency in the way of, whoa, look at all these elite and high performers. I mean, everybody's talking about digital transformation. Everybody knows where the new competitors are. So I think first you need to move your management into declaring a goal that you want to become faster. And we see that with very large organizations in Germany. Our biggest clients are super interested in this study. But it takes time. So you need to give them the book. You need to do a too long didn't read. And at the end, I think the best argument is to say, literally, this is science. Prove me wrong. Do you have better data that we should not explore this path? Maybe we'll find something down the road. Or do you have a better strategy in order to come to this high performance? But after you created this urgency alarm site and, ooh, we're not fast enough, there's a long list of things you still have to do. So you need to create an alliance. You need to find people within your organization that give you a buy-in, maybe some from the management, some from your teams. And then you need to create a vision and do small next steps. For instance, in one of our client contexts, the team decided to implement one of the 24 capabilities, trunk-based development. And then they talk about the success about it. And then all of a sudden a system comes into game and more teams adopt that strategy and so on. So, but this is a long process and this is not done in a day. But yeah, competition is out there. And I think managers should understand that.
Thank you. The last one here is, do you think that return of investment is currently more important than first to market approach?
Well, it depends obviously on your product. I think this is there can be a product where you say first I want to have a big market coverage. I mean, a lot of the startups that are venture capital funded, especially from the USA. I mean, think about how many years Tesla was doing red numbers, right? So there was not the importance of doing return of invest, but it was rather about developing that product, building that infrastructure. And so on. So there's no yes or no, but I think in a given situation, let's say your focus is not return of invest, but time to market, then also these accelerate principles come into play, right? You want to be first mover and you want to ship quickly to your clients, or to your users. So yeah, I think it depends on your situation, but both economical goals, and sorry for just mentioning return of invest here.
Okay, then. Thank you, Yorck. This was the last question. It doesn't seem we have another one. So, yeah, thank you for the presentation and for the good talk. I hope that everyone liked it and will think about and read the book.
Yeah,
thank
cool.
you very much.
Thank you, Jan. And let us know in the comments how you liked it. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. Bye-bye. Thank you.